Pretty punchy assertion, right? Cobra Kai, best show on Netflix? Well, chances are, if you've clicked, you either think I'm right or I'm completely off my nut. If it's the latter, well, I've made my share of film, TV and commercials content in almost 20 years in the industry, so I'll try and lean on some of that experience to try and change your mind. And if you already think it rocks, then hang around and I'll try and lift the magician's curtain and show you some of the cogs whirring away inside. You may have noticed that in the last 5 or 10 years, the number of original movies hitting your local Cineplex has shriveled. Hollywood is now a land of reboots, remakes, prequels, sequels, adaptations, you name it. The two hottest letters in every pitch meeting on Magnolia: IP. And if you don't have some intellectual property to something that's made a shit ton of money somewhere in some form, then you're going to find it really quite hard to get your project off the ground. But let's say you do have some IP. Let's say you've got the rights to the original Karate Kid franchise. What do you do with them? Maybe churn out a remake with Jackie Chan in the Mr. Miyagi role? Yeah, sure, fine. Or do you do what literally no TV network that was out there at the time of commissioning of Cobra Kai had the balls to do? And that is number one, turn the whole premise on its head. The first great thing about Cobra Kai isn't that we get to revisit these characters 35 years later, but we get to blow that world right open. How? By making Johnny Lawrence the protagonist. The Karate Kid movies were always about the triumph of the underdog, and who's a bigger underdog than a washed up, possible alcoholic, absentee, jobless father? By placing Johnny at the heart of this story, we get to see the events of the first movie from a completely different perspective. Is it possible that it was actually Daniel-san who was the asshole back in 1984? Look at it through Johnny's eyes, and sure. Daniel is of course still a major character in Cobra Kai, but be aware that in screenwriting terms, he is now actually our antagonist.
Very own bonsai tree.
Which gives us number two, balance. Heavy season 3 spoilers coming up, by the way. Mr. Miyagi's whole philosophy in the original Karate Kid movies was of course about balance, and never is that more evident than in the setup of Cobra Kai. Our poor kid from Reseda has ended up a successful car dealer in Encino, and our blonde rich boy from Encino has ended up slumming it back where Daniel used to live.
I've lived in this shithole for over 10 years. Pipes don't work, fountains full of piss, and the only good thing about being here is I don't have to talk to anybody.
And as each of our older leads become senseis, their pupils are quite clearly the wrong way round. Sweet, woke Miguel would fit right in at Miyagi-Do, but he is being trained to have no mercy.
So am I gonna get the karate pajamas too?
Quiet! And Johnny's own son, a bad boy from the wrong side of the tracks, finds himself at Miyagi-Do learning the meaning of balance. Where there is yin, there is yang. And look at where we get to in season 3. The bullied become the bullies, and friendships get split with one ending up on each side. Everywhere you look, balance. Number 3, the cast. What a huge achievement it is to get so many of the original cast from the 1980s movies back for the show. And I think it shows just how fondly most of them must have looked back on those experiences at the time. Not just our leads in William Zabka and Ralph Macchio, but all the supporting characters from Randy Heller as Daniel's mum to Elizabeth Shue as we see in season 3, Tamlin Tomita and Yuji Okamoto from Karate Kid 2, and in a brilliant end of season 1 revelation, Martin Kove as Kreese.
That the real story's only just begun.
Having so many of the original cast back gives this world an authenticity that you simply can't get any other way.
Well, what do you know? The gang's all back together.
And you know what else is original from the 1980s movies? Daniel's car, which Ralph Macchio kept after the shooting of the original Karate Kid movie, never sold in the intervening time, and brought it back to use on set for the show. How cool is that? Number 4, the characters. And this one really is a huge achievement on the part of the screenwriters, because not only are you made to empathise with the previous bad guy from the movies, but you pretty much root for all of them. Johnny, Miguel, Sam, Robbie, Dimitri, you're really behind all of them wanting them to succeed. Interestingly though, there is one character the screenwriters don't have to work quite as hard for, and that of course is Daniel LaRusso, and that's because as the audience we've got 35 years of built up empathy towards him, so the screenwriters don't have to do quite so much saving of the cat for him, so to speak, for us to actually care what happens to him. And even the bad kids like Hawk and Tori clearly have some good in them. The question is though, does Kreese? Could he be turned like Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi? Is there any redemption possible for the lapel-tugging arch-bastard himself? The backstory flashbacks we get in Season 3 suggests there might be. Number 5. Setups and payoffs. The original Karate Kid movie was an excellent execution of a very finely polished script. And what was great about that script, amongst many other things, the execution of the setups and payoffs. The crane kick at the end stayed in all of our memories for so long because it was such a beautiful payoff to the setup of seeing Mr. Miyagi practicing the same move on the beach. The Season 1 finale to Cobra Kai of course paid homage to that moment with the one-handed handstand kick that we see Robbie perform, but of course the writers knew better than to actually let him win with it and rehash that same beat completely. The thing is, it's not just the major setups and payoffs which are done so well in Cobra Kai, it's the whole thing. It's an incredibly well thought out and tightly knitted piece of writing across all 3 seasons. The Empire Strikes Back's most famous line, "No, I am your father," is of course a payoff to the scene early in Star Wars, a film and 3 years earlier, where Obi-Wan tells Luke about the death of his father. But this length of rush of insight has got nothing compared to what we see in Cobra Kai Season 3. Which does it across 35 years and numerous movies, not just once but several times. Daniel LaRusso saves his dealership in 2020 as a result of his bravery on a stormy night in Okinawa in 1985. That's pretty cool, as is meeting Kimiko and Chosen again. But it's nothing compared to the final scene in the final episode of Season 3, which brings together everything we've been rooting for, not just since the first Karate Kid movie, but through all episodes of 3 seasons of Cobra Kai itself. And that is, will the two of them just get along? Is it possible? Could it be? Maybe? And what a track to use for it. Which brings us to number 6. Arcs. Character arcs to be precise. Cobra Kai is loaded with them, and they're not all the same stereotypical cliched ones we might expect from the genre. Sweet, woke Miguel turns into a total wanker by the end of Season 1. By the end of Season 2 he's learnt to actually show mercy, but then is suddenly punished for it. Epic. Peripheral characters like Dimitri and Hawk and even Yasmin go on their own journeys, transformed by their choices and experiences. But perhaps the most satisfying arc is that of our hero Johnny, who seems resolutely stuck in the past, unable to let go of the way things were in the 80s. He lives in a fantasy that that's the way things still are, and obsesses over a girl who dumped him 35 years ago. And over 3 seasons and plenty of false starts, he finally gets there. Learns to let go of the past, old grudges, old loves, and to live in the present. Let's see where his relationship with Carmen goes in Season 4.
Then again, you're pretty hot.
A little observation here, and that is that the writers have chosen not to mess with Daniel too much, and there's a good reason why. If the philosophy of Mr. Miyagi was somehow flipped or Daniel turned away from it somehow, it would destabilise the base that the whole show is built on. Yes, he learns to get over his grudges too, but his arc is much subtler. I'll come back to this respect for canon a little bit later.
Yeah, me too.
Number 7. This is one of the hardest things to capture, and it is tone. Cobra Kai has captured the essence of the 80s in a way that no other show that's been trying to do so, that's been made in recent times, has managed. And it's really hard. It takes more than just the props, costumes, and hairstyles of Stranger Things to be able to do it. It's about a certain innocence and lack of cynicism, and it is that tone that creates Cobra Kai's universal appeal. Because it's not just Gen Xers like me who grew up in the 80s who love this show, it's millennials and zennials too. So how do you capture that tone? How do you capture that feeling? The answer is that the themes explored in the show are a large part of it. The way the characters are drawn, the choices they make, the reasons why they make them. And it's the little touches too. Let's take the front wedgie that Aisha gives Yasmin in season 1.
No mercy, bitch!
Wedgies were somehow just a perfectly 80s thing. Has anyone actually done one since? I don't know. Certainly not on screen. It's these little touches on top of the way the dynamic is built that really makes the show sing. And sing it does, because Cobra Kai is funny. Most of the humour comes from Johnny's inability to deal with modern day activities, equipment or values. Whether it's liking all of Ali's Facebook posts,
Oh no.
or smacking the schoolbooks out of a student's hand out of sheer habit after giving a rousing chat in a school that he wasn't supposed to be in.
And don't be late! Sorry, kid, old habit.
Cobra Kai is always looking for that opportunity to make a gag at Johnny's expense, and we love him for it. Number 9. Action. Now, action is really hard to shoot. With the exception of films like The Raid, most action scenes are put together with multiple angles and fast cuts. And that's because it's really hard to make it not look shit if you're pointing a camera at a fight that isn't really happening, where people aren't really hitting each other and aren't really getting hurt. But Cobra Kai gives us these incredible long brawl scenes which go on in these incredibly long single shots. And they come at the climax of the season when there's the most at stake. I'm going to make another film touching on this point later about The Matrix, which does this incredibly well. The thing is, our eyes have become saturated in the world of CG blockbusters. We've all seen anything that can happen on screen, and it's very difficult to now create that wow factor. But if you time your points of action of the movie at the same time when there are the highest stakes for the characters that you're invested in, then you've really got something. But it takes a ton of training for your actors, like months and months. It takes weeks of choreography, great vision as a director, and the studio or the network to have enough faith in you that they will back you spending days and days simply shooting a single scene like this. But boy is it worth it. Number 10, and maybe this is the most important one because this is what makes it all possible. Cobra Kai has been made with love. Absolute respect and affection for the original material, and a desire to not just use and abuse it, but to respect and pay homage to it in whatever way it can. When the showrunner and the writers show this much love for the material, it filters down through every department on set.
Medic!
And you get a show that's as rich in texture as Cobra Kai is. Another example of this is The Mandalorian, a show made with so much love for the original trilogy that it almost renders the sequels pointless. And let's not even talk about the prequels. But that's for another film. This was Cobra Kai, and the 10 reasons why it kicks the most ass on Netflix.